Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you are having an excellent South by in Austin. Let's get this panel started with a little bit of introductions here. So this is our album photo when they get our slides up here. And my name is Jared Ficklin. I'm one of the founding partners at Argo Design. This is a product design firm here in Austin. For 25 years, I've been creating bleeding edge interfaces, including 3 years working with Rony as a strategic design partner at Magic Leap. And one of my favorite technologies that I've been spending a lot of time obsessing over is the meta wayfarers. I think when we were working with Rony, we set the bar, and this is perhaps one of the first steps there. Love the product, not sure about the factory. Jessica is a mixed reality creator. She's a writer and a theorist, former principal filmmaker for VR at Google, and a research director of the Mixed Reality Lab at USC's Institute for Creative Technologies. And she is a strategic design advisor for one of Rony's new startups, SynthB. And Jessica gave us this image as one of her favorite things. What would you like to say about this image?
So this actually comes from a game called Jessica's Cats that my dad created in HyperCard when I was young. It's probably weird that it's a mackerel, and he didn't really know why he put that in a game filled with cats either. But what happens is when you play it, it actually makes the sound of lasers, which aren't playing. It doesn't play in the actual video, so I have to play it up here. Oh, yeah.
It goes pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew. Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons I love this thing. One, it's awesome, and I want to show you because it's awesome. But the second thing is this is the kind of work that is usually designed away, controlled away with current technology that we have now, where it seems like those little human elements, those little moments of randomness are usually the first things to go. And so something I'm thinking about is how do we preserve that in the future as we start building new systems and new forms of computing.
So you've all had your first HyperCard sighting at South.
And now you know what HyperCard is. No, sorry.
Very influential piece of software. Rony
Yes.
is the founder and CEO of SynthB and Sun and Thunder, what we're here to talk about. Also the founder of Mako Surgical. He has made his own robots, something we have in common. Founder of Magic Leap. He plays guitar and bass, and I can tell you that he talks about the future a lot, but he's one of those rare people who then goes on to make it actually real. And Rony, you gave me this image. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, we're a little bit working on a time machine at SynthB in the sense that with the right AI platforms, we can maybe jump hundreds or thousands of years into the future, find out what's good, what's bad, bring it back to our time, and hopefully use it in a good way.
Fantastic. Sir Richard Taylor is the co-founder of WETA Companies and owner of the WETA Workshop. And Pukeko Pictures with his wife, Tanya Roger, and a founding board member of Magic Leap. He's a passionate advocate for the creative process, and the thing he loves the most today is other makers. And you gave me this image here. What would you say about this image?
Well, hello, everyone. It's lovely to be with you all, having a chat today. We've had a 35-year career utilizing animatronics in the creation of puppetry. And so for me and our team at the workshop, it's incredibly thrilling to think that our robotic performance characters are now going to be imbued with a higher level of spirit through the use of AI. Funky stuff.
Fabulous. All right, let's set the stage here a little bit for what we're going to talk about. Let's go a little bit into the future, okay? In the future, computing completely exceeds human perception. Computers can create more colors than we can biologically perceive, and it can process information faster than our neurons fire. Computing is generative at this point, and it's far more useful than just creating images of that one time you were at Burning Man with the Pope, which was a great week. We had a moment in the temple. We are entered the age of comprehension where computers understand us in a really human level and are able to communicate back to us in a very human level. We have wearable mobile computers. We walk around with an amplified and augmented reality where our digital lifestyle is participating in the real world with us. Our data is in a marketplace. We own it, can profit from it. We transact with it, and we have more language around it just like we do with money. So I could spot you a little my data. We have it in abundance. AI and other technologies have created goods at a level that reaches us into post-capitalism, and we trade in prompts. We speak constantly about the jargon of how to instruct our computers to produce the outcomes that we would like. Our creativity is amplified at humanity to a brand new level, and we constantly debate our role as whether we should create sentient life out of machines or not. But we are still the experts on humanity, and we have entered an age of hyper-creativity. Here's the trick. That's not really the future. There's only a couple things in that we have not achieved today. In fact, that is the reality of the times. You could say that we are in a golden hour of technology, and what comes after the golden hour is the hour blue. The hour blue. This is that time where the sun is set, and the blues come in and the gradients dissolve the foreground into the background, and everything seems quite magical yet suspenseful in a lot of traditions. From ancient times to today, during this moment is when the fairies come out. It's when portals open into alternate universes. So it's no surprise that Rony and Richard in their new Sun and Thunder studios named a construct that we're gonna talk about today, Hour Blue. And I have a trailer to start us off, then we're gonna get into some question and answer in a moderated form, and the last 15 minutes are dedicated to your questions and answers. So you saw the thing about Slido at the beginning. Everyone on the live stream and here in the room, start getting your questions ready. Let's watch a trailer together.
Damaged souls are we, broken, spiraling amongst the galaxies, born into many worlds, lost, infinite.
One may die in a dream, but one can also become reborn.
He threw me to the ground and ran towards the forest. But it was too late. They were on us. Those that would be the Moraveckian kings. Waves of singularity rushed upon our shores. All that we knew was lost. Welcome to the Hour Blue.
I'll say this. It is all real. It is all.
All right, let's make this all add up. That was pretty interesting, and no doubt all of you noticed the shift in quality at the end. But Richard, I'd like to start with you. Okay, Tolkien is often credited with creating something that is called a mythopia, right? And can you start us out here by telling us what exactly a mythopia is, and what is it like using high technology to fulfill a story that is set in what is essentially a literary device?
Yeah, we've had the great pleasure of working really within a number of mythopias. Ultimately, filmmaking in its earliest and simplest form can be considered that you only build and need to tell a story in which the triangle of the camera of the film sees. I guess a cowboy western would be the greatest example of that, where you only build the flats of the streets and no more. But of course, a modern day audience is desiring a fully immersive, believable, authentic ecology for their consumption of movie making. And when we started to develop our careers, we realized that it was beholden on us to try and think about a way that the audience could perceive that the world existed beyond what the director was showing you. And that, of course, is about building believable and plausible worlds. Suddenly, Lord of the Rings is upon us, and an author has pre-created this incredible mythopia, a modern mythology for a new audience. And we need to give the illusion that that world cinematically exists to the breadth that Middle-earth, as written by Tolkien, does. The way I like to describe it is, in a perfect world, should the audience stand up from their chair, you know, I'm in a cinema and I stand up and I step forward to the screen, and if I were to look around the proscenium arch like this, I would entirely believe that the world that has been created in that rectangle by the director might exist around a planet. James Cameron has created some movies called Avatar, but really it's a movie of Pandora. The Mythopia is Pandora, and he's just pierced the skin of that world with two specific stories, one about a group of Na'vi living in a tree culture and another about a group of Na'vi living in a water culture. But anywhere that he should drop that pin onto that planet, you would find equal and enriched stories within the Mythopia of Middle-earth, within the Mythopia of Pandora, within the Mythopia of Middle-earth, or whether it's Narnia or Hour Blue. And when Rony approached us over 12 years ago now, he wasn't perceiving of a film, of a moment that he could slice out of the story and tell to an audience. He was perceiving of a modern and new Mythopia that would exist in the world for future audiences to experience and consume. The second part of the question, it's interesting when you start to think about how you achieve that beyond the confines of the rectangular screen of the movie cinema and the television. And with the emerging capabilities of the type of technology that Rony is developing, suddenly for us practitioners of our art, there is the potential that we can start to tell story worlds that are fully immersive, a vestibule into which you can put art, music, and all the elements that may exist around mythology, spirituality, etc. So for us, it's a very exciting offering to be going on this journey with Rony and Jessica and others to see what is possible in a story world setting.
So Rony, thank you, Richard. And Hour Blue is a story world, which is not quite a mythopia. At lunch, you were telling me a lot about this. Can you repeat for the audience, like what exactly is a story world? How is it an advancement, or is it an advancement on a mythopia?
So first of all, I just want to say this at South by Southwest once, like, hello, Cleveland. Sorry, that's where I'm from. Hey, Austin. So what's a story world? Did you actually do that? Yeah, I did. Hello,
Yeah,
Cleveland.
you did.
So a story world, I'll use a metaphor. Let's think about Japan, a real country. It's been around for tens of thousands of years. So think of a container around Japan that contains its geography, the animals, the culture, the music, the art, the films, the food, the wars, the tens of millions of lives, every apartment and every little family and every little story that's happened in Japan. That entire container is a story world. And I think of a mythopia as a single individual author trying to imagine a conjured place like that. But it is still not that fullness of what a Japan is. Like, Japan is the analog story world. So what we're basically proposing is that, and this is when I came to Richard when he was in the middle of making Avatar, the first one, I said, Hour Blue is going to be this thing we didn't really have a name for. And we needed all these crazy technologies. Like, we kind of had to invent a big piece of augmented reality and immersive computing in order to go beyond film. Now we're in the age of AI where these story worlds are possible, because think about How many people, like 10,000 people for a decade, make a movie series, you know, like Lord of the Rings? How many people would you need for how many thousands of years to build a detailed, rich story world? Not an empty 2D Nintendo Wii type world, which we're seeing in like sort of early metaverse things. And by the way, Neil's a good friend, so it's nothing about that. But it's like, I'm defining something different, which is this rich, detailed container for culture, for art, for music that is impossible for human beings to do alone. And I think it's the worthy container for what creative AI can help us fill up. Don't displace the past, build something completely new that has the space and reservoir for our new creative future that needs to be amplified by this technology we're building. So it's kind of looking really into that future, and that's what Storyworlds are, and that's really what we wanted to get across today. Session over. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
That's it, done, everyone home.
All good.
Jessica, so if I understand this, Rony, like this is an interactive environment at a very high fidelity with a depth of perhaps true immersion, where art, music, philosophy are realized, right? Jessica, you spent a lot of time creating and studying virtual worlds. What is the interface like for someone to participate in this? Is technology or the computer interface or even humanity, like humans themselves, like, are we sophisticated enough for this?
I don't know. I would say, well, to start, I would say that the interface, the computing interface as we know it to be now, is fundamentally broken. I actually think computers aren't built correctly. We have computers the way they are because it worked at the time, and then that just kept on going. Once businesses started to pop up, once money was involved, once our eyes were involved, just the same old road. And one of the most annoying things, and my colleagues would agree that they've heard this quite a lot from me, and I will still continue to say it, most interfaces built for VR are terrible. They require you to type, they require you to, hit an app, and I hate apps, and I've always hated apps because really it creates so much mess and so much complication where there is an elegance and a simplicity in abstracting human experience in a completely different way. We've had windows and tabs, like finders, apps again, we haven't changed it for more than half a century. And so one of the things I've been telling Rony about a lot is when we start really thinking about whatever this new ecosystem is, which will involve virtual worlds, intelligent systems, and so on, we really need to think holistically about what the experience is going to be and how we have changed as humans in the process of technology having become more and more a part of our lives. And so that really is the thing that I'm quite excited about, is that reinvention, that redesign from the ground up, but also to really evaluate what is still left of us that is truly human before computers existed, what is human behavior from then that still exists, and what are we now, having had computers in our lives for so long.
So I'm going to read that as there's a metaphorical mismatch between the interfaces, that we are currently mostly working with the 60s office place metaphor, and there are people putting files in folders who've never put files in folders before.
100%, and you know what? The thing is, they're probably not going to be changed by the big companies anyway, because everyone's so familiar with apps and everyone's so familiar with Windows. To fundamentally change the operating system would require complete overhauls of design ethos at all these companies. And the truth is, they're not going to do that.
So Rony, this graphic I have up here, I've tried to summarize some of the immersive worlds that exist, starting with the Mythopia, right? And you can see a story is created right through a Mythopia. A film can be bigger than just literary because you're going to add pictures to it. And we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so 1,000 pictures is worth 1 billion words, or whatever the math is, right? Then you have game worlds, which are probably the most popular interactive worlds that we have today in a story world, right? Obviously, multiple stories could be made through this. What is the real difference between a game world and a story world?
That's a great question, Jared. No, so I envision a story world to be something where, and I'll give you an example of something that just happened. You are not trying to gain points. You're not trying to kill a bunch of things really fast before time runs out. On the way here, just did a road trip from Atlantic to Pacific and back. So as we're crossing the border from New Mexico to Arizona, we see this really obscure roadside place called the Yellow Horse. Pull over, walk in. There's a Navajo Native American proprietor. It's got really cool stuff. Looking around, and there's like archery equipment on the wall. And there's an older man in his 80s who was in and walked out. And I asked him, do you have like real bows? Because I love to do archery. And he starts talking about like, there's all the different things, but what he's got there's more for show. But he said the guy that just left, he's a master archer and he's a master builder. And he runs out in the parking lot, grabs this person who learned from his Navajo great-grandfather and grandfather how to make a Navajo bow. And he comes back in, and he starts teaching me how to shoot in the Navajo style. Both eyes open, you pull the bow back, you just kind of quickly see it. He talked about hitting flies on the wall at 20 meters. It was incredible, and it's like, would you make me a bow? Maybe. We exchanged numbers. And he told me the story of his family. He pulled out like photos of his grandfather and grandparents that go back to the 1800s. And like, to me, that moment felt like I was in a story world. I had that same feeling being in Kyoto, just wandering around late at night amongst the shrines and going into an ancient samurai restaurant. And like, they talked about the beams. This is where the beams are low, so they couldn't actually fight inside. They had to go fight in the alleyway outside. But sometimes they would be friends and all kind of sleep there after a good sake. And if they wanted to fight, you had to go in the hall. And this was like from the 1800s, like a Wild West saloon for samurai. And I'm like, there was no game here. But the experience, the storytelling was infinite in all directions. The fact that you could just meet someone and you don't treat them like a non-player character. Every single person had this depth, this soul, this sort of infinite reality that you can chase. It wasn't a visual dimension, it was a story dimension. So it's like those kind of encounters convinced me that like we need to be building these things as containers for art and culture and music and stories, as preservations of cultures. And then game worlds will coexist. Like nothing wrong with game worlds. Like let there be Fortnite, let there be all those cool games. I love Epic, but they're not the same thing. Like a book is not a game. A great movie, when you watch Apocalypse Now, that's not a game world. It is something else. When you read 1984 or Brave New World, it's those kind of things I think can find homes in this idea of a story world. And I think about great filmmakers, like what happens after film? First of all, film can live in a story world. You may encounter a city in a story world where there's a film festival created by entities you've never met, and music created by AI entities that have lived there for, in their world, thousands of years, in our world, maybe a month, and have generated all sorts of amazing music and culture. So I think what Jared's got here is the non-linear, infinite in all directions, but the dimension is story. The dimension is like emotional depth and art. And that container to house like the things we care about. And then alongside that will be the game world, but the game world has dominated all the conversation. It's sort of dominated all the funding and all the conversation. And I sense that if you are the kind of artist who doesn't want to build games, you're like, where do I go? What do I do? And I think that's where story worlds could be that next place for us.
Jessica, if we pick up on what Rony just said, right?
We're gonna fight?
A film basically,
Kung Fu style.
You said this at lunch, Richard, a film pulls you by a string, right? Starts at 0 hour, and whatever the time scale is in the movie, you end real life 2 hours later. You might have gone through 100 years in the film. A game is this kind of like time loop where you go to the end, accomplish a goal, restart the match. Go to the end, restart the match, right? Whereas a story world, you can meander. How does time work in a virtual world? Is it going to be
time's kind of, it's first of all, time's subjective. Second, time is like a human thing, right? So I think time, as it exists in this I'm sorry, I know I'm going to go real deep right now, but it's like when
Let's go there.
What's up?
Let's go deep. It's South by.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think what's really interesting about the construct of time is that you can apply it in virtual worlds in completely different ways and unpack our relationship with time overall as a species. So, it's also like, if you think about time, like you see a star in the sky and it's, that light has been traveling for like 1 billion years, right? So like and it also only takes a second just to look up and see it. So I think there's like a lot of really interesting interplay there between like what we believe time to be and what time could be in a completely different format or medium.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce a new concept to the room here. This is called the Kyoto Test. Richard and Rony wrote it, and it's basically essentially let's talk about this maybe as like the Turing test. What good is it for us anymore? Feels like it has been passed 50 times, and there's a lot of debate about whether it's passed, but it seems like there's a new test these guys have come up with, which is if you can spend 3 days in an X-verse surrounded by sentient and aware life that never breaks your sense of a neurologically true experience, you've passed the Kyoto test. Because we could all fly to Kyoto, spend 3 days in Kyoto, and feel like we were part of Japan the entire time, right? Richard, is this a fidelity that we can accomplish today, or
No, it's not a fidelity that can be accomplished today, but we believe it can be accomplished and can be accomplished in the near coming years. Seeing the amplification of creativity through technology and the ability to, our challenge collectively, of course, is keeping the spirit of the creative at the heart of the invention. As we talked about the other night, never letting the tail wag the dog. It's critical that we continue to be the dog wagging the tail. And if we can stay in charge of the spirit of the creative process, what's at the heart of this, while people such as Rony, Jessica and their colleagues develop a heightened level of technology to allow this, then indeed this is within our grasp. And it is another form of immersive entertainment and that people can enjoy and experience. It doesn't have to be the only form, and it doesn't in any way rule out the way things are made today. But isn't it lovely to think that we're constantly exploring new ways to share story? Creativity is chaos, and storytelling is the way that we can share our conceptual thoughts with others in the world. And this is a new and exciting way to do that.
now,
Wait, can I?
absolutely, absolutely.
So the Kyoto test goes on the pretense that you would have to be in that experience for 3 days, right? Isn't that a little bit scary? Isn't it like, because if you look at, I know that, video games are a little bit different than what you're suggesting, but if I could just be on Cyan makes incredible games. The fidelity isn't super, but it's beautiful, and they made it in HyperCard, speaking of which. So they were using very minimal kind of artistic tech at the time. I could be stuck on Myst forever if given the chance, right? So, I'm going to defend these guys and a lot of other companies who consider themselves game designers, because I do think they think very much about the infinite amount of stories that could potentially unfold. The technology just hasn't been there for people to necessarily explore it that way, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is the 3-day. And it's also kind of relevant to video games as well, where a lot of video game addiction comes from people whose lives, not so good here, and suddenly they're in control of them, they're able to manipulate them the way that they want, they have a win state, which life isn't always win state, we all know.
Golden box, good thing it's not, right?
Yeah. And so my worry is yes, I think that there is some level of comfort that needs to be involved with these worlds that make people feel like they're explorable the way that they would explore another world, right? But I do think we need to be very careful of people who will now then use that world as escapism, as opposed to realizing that they are still biological beings.
We're going to talk about more about that later for sure. That's a very interesting point. And I think about the 3-day thing, like I practice a NEPI sometimes. This is a sweat
how do you go to the bathroom?
Okay? And you have to be prepared to go in them.
Can I throw one thing, Jared?
Yeah, how is humanity going to be prepared?
So think about it as a sound barrier, right? We don't have to always travel faster than the speed of sound for flight to be useful, but the Kyoto test is crossing that is a signifier of what's possible, but it may be that all you want to do is live in a 0.5 Kyoto or a 0.2, and that's actually perfectly great. But the fact that it's out there as a barrier to cross, I think, is interesting.
So Rich,
and by no means is it aspiring to have all people involved try and meet the 3-day expectation. It is it is a challenge that we've set ourselves, and maybe only we are the three that ultimately try and meet that 3-day.
I like going to the bathroom the old-fashioned way, man. I'm just gonna.
You know,
Well, I'm one of those few people who has like 10,000 hours wearing one of these magic goggles on my face, so I'll probably spend 3 days. But you spoke about a technology enabler, which, spoiler alert, it's AI, right? Rony, how is AI important to this concept of a story world and the Kyoto Test?
So AI is incredibly important, but I just want to say that the word AI means at this point thousands of different concepts and architectures. So the type of AI that we're working on, we have in a sister company called SynthP, is a really different concept. It's something that you would work with an artisanal community of synthetic beings, not a gigantic monolithic AI. And I think to build these incredibly crafted worlds that have a level of fidelity and detail and quality that also has like a soul to it and has a feeling to it, that a creative human team can be in charge of and not lose its sense of purpose and have these things work alongside them is a really key thing we're doing. It's really posing a different philosophy of AI systems. So I think we're trying to do two things at once. Posit the idea of a story world and also posit a parallel AI system that is not following the road of the other AI companies. And I think what's interesting is that the underlying power pushing AI can be redirected a number of ways. It doesn't all have to be the giant 2001 monolith. There's other ways to channel that energy and do amazing creative work and not lose our humanity and not lose our souls in the process.
Well, I'm looking forward, we're going to talk about that in the second half of the panel. But first, let's watch something that humanity and AI created together. And I'm going to throw the caveats for these guys out in front of it. You all know that the pace of this is moving so fast and that they actually created this in enough time to bring it to the festival. So I think it's a beautiful piece of work. Let's see a short clip of it really quick. This is Yellow Dove Aftermath. It's currently a short film that was, if you will, and I know I'm begging a little license, filmed in Hour Blue, if you will, a human and AI collaboration. Thank you. That's a very short clip of a 9-minute short, right? And you'd be hard pressed, and in fact, a lot of people want to ask the question, what was AI and what was humanity, right? But I think a more important thing for us to discuss right now is what is the right way to do AI so that humans are amplified in their creativity. So what would bring us in this world of hyper-creativity? And I think this is the subject of the other startup. So the first startup, Sun and Thunder Studios, is looking to produce films in a new way, but also produce story worlds. SynthP is a new startup, Rony, that you've created. If you told me about it, and I thought of this. For that you describe it as a bunch of AI workers that were able to amplify humanity. Can you tell us a little more about what is SynthP, how it's relevant here, and then I think it's gonna lead us to a discussion about AI architectures and AI and humanity.
Yeah, so we're in building mode, which we call black card mode. So I'm gonna use that as the prompt to hand you one of these, Jared. Yeah, we're not using stealth mode anymore. We're just calling it building mode. But one of the big differences, I'll just talk about what is largely out there that's captured the imagination and fear in AI, and what is possible is a different path. So I think people see the power they also see it as potentially taking over a lot of the workforce. People perceive AI as something that's grabbed all the data and everyone's work that we never really agreed to, or maybe we agreed to without understanding what we handed over. These are gigantic, monolithic things that we cannot know what's going on the inside. The fathers of modern AI have largely come out and said, we don't really know why they work anymore. So your data has been taken for the last 20 years, somewhat willingly, somewhat you just don't know what you signed. In exchange for, here's some email, but I'm handing over most of my life and I don't really know what I handed over. The next thing is your know-how. So if you hand over your data, you hand over your know-how into a gigantic machine, and I think of this as like central autocracy. Do we want to live a future where our creativity, our imagination, our work, our personal lives are managed by a handful of central autocratic companies? And to that, we're saying F no. I'm not allowed to say the full version. So the alternative is something I think of as decentralized democratic computing and decentralized democratic AI. Which means that you can have the power, but totally control it. You can have transparency, visibility, understandability, knowability. So the idea that this black box thing is somehow I type a prompt and out comes a 2-hour movie, it removes us from that. Even though it's amazingly powerful, what happened to our craft? What happened to our collaboration? And I probably have one of the most interesting experiences about this because I founded a company that was AI and robotics called Mako. And our competitors were basically trying to shove a robot to take over for surgeons. And we created this really friendly R2-like robot that collaborated with surgeons. And if you look at Mako afterwards, if you look at it today, there's been over 1.5 million surgeries. With an AI that has helped 1.5 million people, it hasn't hurt anyone, thank God. It's been mission critical. And if you look at photos on the web, the teams have birthday parties for their robot. They give it names. It's become a friend. It's R2. And actually, R2 was our mood board inspiration. And think about the inspiration mood board for what you're hearing about AI that's dominating the conversation today. It's like everyone just watched 2001 or Terminator or Skynet, and they're like, let's go build that without thinking too much beyond that. So we're saying there's an alternate philosophical approach, which is really a approach which is decentralized democratic computing. And you can have artisanal, much smaller, collaborative, I think of them as synthetic beings, not just a brainless box, but beings that will actually have a relationship with you over time. They will have their own relationships. They will earn their creativity. It's a very different kind of thinking process than what's being talked about in other circles, probably here. But we wanted to do both things to say that creativity being pushed forward, I think will move into the idea of a story world, but we need these helpers to fill up these gigantic containers. But those helpers should not be malevolent, dystopian, philosophical concepts. They ought to be built on a completely different philosophy. And I think philosophy starts with the thought about what you're building. What is the intent? So I spent a long time working with people like Richard, amazing creative artists, and the intent and the spirit you put into the work, the love and that feeling, is also something that will show up in your software, in your computing. So if we build soulless machines, they will be soulless, they will be dystopian. But if we build things that have positivity and with an artisanal craft and an eye to something that will help us, not displace us, that's a very different future, and that's the future. We're waving the flag here today and wearing the hat, because Jared told me to get the hat. So this is our, decentralized democratic computing, I think, is critical to our future as people. And everyone here, everyone online, is gonna have a decision. Am I just gonna submit to a giant central controlled autocracy? Or are you gonna just give them your middle finger and go about it and do it a different way? Which is wandering in the desert in the beginning, but it is taking a different path, and that's what we're for.
So if I get this correctly, right, it took, yes, please. If it took 10,000 years and a few thousand years of humanity to build Kyoto to a point where it's fully immersive and passes its own test, if you will, it will require AI workers to build a story world with the filigree down to a level that it can represent art, music, philosophy, and such. And this is the bar that you guys are setting.
For a sec?
Yeah.
I just want to say, the original RUR story is a worker uprising, because you people mistreated the worker. I don't think of synthpes as workers who are subordinate to you. Think of them as artisanal, collaborative friends. And I think just that mindset, they're not going to be necessarily this thing you shove around. Imagine them as like the collaboration like I've had with WETA. When you go down there to New Zealand, they're artisans. You work with them in a very particular way, and I think that feedback loop is incredibly important. If you read like anything about The Strange Loop, right? So it's an amazing book about like your interaction with objects in the world and beings in the world. The strange loop we're gonna have with AI, if we mistreat them, they will mistreat us back a millionfold. If we treat them with love and care and as partners, which I saw at Mako firsthand, it's worked. It beat all the other philosophies. This is the way, this is the way.
Well, but they still do things a lot faster than I can, or artists. And so, Richard, you work with a lot of creatives. How are they handling this moment, this intersection of AI and creativity? Is this a new bar for them that they're like really rushing into, or is it an unsettled moment?
Well, as a company, we've always tried to pursue a depth of innovation and creative inspiration within the company to try and drive a way forward for all that work with us and people that are yet to join us. You know, the adoption of technologies tends to be for the people in the moment that are there at the inception point of that technology. And it's not for us to define what people will and won't have an opportunity to use. But we are in a conundrum to some degree as a company because we have a B2B business and we have a B2C business. And in our B2B business, we have a very strong ethical and business rationale because we have to prove the passage of ownership back to the artwork that we're creating. So we don't use AI at all in our screen work, nor do we want to at this point, because it is the rules of the game by which the industry is operating. But our B2C work, we need to stay competitive. We desire to innovate at the cutting edge of what we can achieve as a company. Our robotics division is a good example of that. But it is a driving desire to make sure that the aspiration for innovation within our company and creative leadership stays at the forefront, and we wrestle these ethical and commercial issues as we go forward.
Okay, so if we're successful here and there's a story world and it passes the Kyoto Test, Jessica, I want with your specialist to ask this to you. Does that mean we've crossed the uncanny valley? And if we have crossed the uncanny valley, what's on the other side?
You just give me the hardest questions.
You're the smartest person here.
I'm going to record that. Oh, no, they are already. Thank you.
It's recorded.
So I've always believed the uncanny valley has less to do with fidelity and more to do with relationships. And I have every amount of respect for Richard. I think he's amazing. And the work that they do is amazing. I come from a place where I believe there is a time for fidelity, and then there's a time for abstraction. I think that when I was at MXR and I led a research project around, you know, abstracting visual assets, right? This idea that, you know, if you don't have great bandwidth, or you're just in a place where there's no internet, but you do need core information delivered to you, you would, you know, maybe there was some sort of abstracted version of, you know, a place, so that you're actually able to explore it and get the kind of information you need from it, at least from that point. And I find that also brings me to this idea of how visual assets don't have to be one thing and that's it. Like, virtual assets can be multiple things packaged up together that rack either high fidelity or smiley face, you know, or a stick of butter if you're in VR chat. But you basically have, you know, that range, and that changes depending on context, and it's constantly adapting based upon what your intent is, what the technology allows for you to do, and so on and so forth. So I think of uncanny valleys as being a result of us only believing that a being is one thing and that's it. I think that resonance and that adaptability in response to me, that responsiveness, that relationship is the thing that's missing.
I did the...
And I don't know what's on the other side of that, by the way.
I did the intellectual version of say something funny there, and you really delivered, thank you.
Why had the chicken cross the road?
Right, exactly. To get to, I would say on the other side of the uncanny valley are the plains of myopia, where everything is possible, but you can only see so far and look in one direction. So you just don't know what to do with the technology. Like you just kind of like everything seems possible and you paralysis by analysis. I believe that's almost where we are in technology today. I want to finish up with a couple things here real quick, and then we'll get to a final question and then your Q&A. So get on Slido and ask your questions. One is I'd like to show this image. It's one of hundreds I've created with the platform Midjourney, which is particularly adept at creating images of dystopian humanity subject to the oppression of AI. And it's why I get up every morning and tell Alexa to let them, know that the robots are, I am on their side. And I'm a product designer, and as a product designer, we have this conundrum of, are we foisting something that is good for humanity? Does humanity need another cooler mixed with a blender, mixed with a Bluetooth speaker that you can ride on at a festival, right? And we're beginning, and as product designers, to think that not everything we make does advance humanity. And so I've created a personal philosophy called technophilia, which states it's okay to love technology so long as you love humanity equally or more. And it has this set of principles that technology should live in service of humanity. It should seek to amplify, not emulate humanity, so we don't end up in the same resource conundrum. That it should treat privacy as a virtue. We should all be priests. It's okay for me to know what you have for lunch, but I'm going to pretend like I don't with the fear of some burning hell behind it. That it seeks to build presence, not escapism. Just because we can build robots to pick crops, should we not then solve immigration issues here in North America, right? And it should build authenticity, help us be our best selves rather than influence. To kind of close this out, I'd ask the three of you, is there anything you would add or remove or comment on this time when it feels like responsibility and technology are really a little too distant?
Well, your second one, I totally respect and appreciate your lofty aspirations, and with a certain sector of the robotics industry, it absolutely is appropriate. But for ourselves, we are trying to emulate, because humans like being entertained by things that look like humans, right? You could argue that a animated feature film is an emulation of the human race, and the robots that we are attempting to build, you saw one earlier, is a humanoid form wrapped in an orc-like character who entertains and brings joy to the multitude of people that interact with him every day through one of our LBEs. So I aspire to achieve a level of emulation through robotics that can bring joy and fun and love and entertainment to people.
So you'd add the purpose of emulation is very important, and not just to eschew it.
It is through the entertainment industry. Most actors are emulating a person that they're not. They're ultimately standing on stage lying to themselves and the audience because they are performing something that they're not, right? They're making up a story that doesn't really exist, and so they're emulating constantly. And it's a lofty aspiration of ours to try and meet that. Whether we ever will be yet seen, but we certainly have set ourselves that challenge.
Jessica?
I would say privacy is essential. Like, not even a virtue. Privacy has to happen. We joke about server to table. ideas where it's like, you can imagine people with servers in their backyards that are actually their server farms, next to your garden or whatever.
Personal area network.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just think that, we now have, a lot of the infrastructure that we used to have that used to be, just governed by specific, plants, are now distributed. Solar's distributed. There's a concept called district energy where my dad did a lot of that work, which was all about like creating more subsets of like personalized energy consumption so that you're able to actually tap in. So I think that there's, there's an opportunity here to be able to give people control of their data. And as this stuff moves on, data is all we'll have, and the only leverage we'll ever have as stuff starts to happen. The other thing I would say is that there needs to be respect for the human experience. I think that there is a disrespect, a grave disrespect, for what we do with, how we interact with the world, how we interact with each other. There's a lot of, I don't mean to sound so like down. I'm sorry if I do. I was just like, I take this stuff really serious. But I think we really, we can't be like, okay, a like isn't a relationship, right? Real relationships with people matter. The nuances of human experience matter. And I think that technology should be built with this necessary respect for what that is and what that needs to be.
Rony, close us out here, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Yeah, really quick. I agree with all these. The thing I would add is boundary conditions to protect our humanity. And what I mean by that is think of knowledge as like a fire. And as we get closer and closer to it, we can get burnt. Oppenheimer won the Academy Award, last night. It's really a great lesson. And there are those that think we could just race right into that fire and everything will be okay. But I think we have to understand that it won't all be okay. We have to put boundary conditions and use technology to make our humanity better, to improve the human condition. But don't go beyond a certain point. We don't need to. We're not gods. We're basically people. And I think if we recognize our limitations and our humility, that's actually really important. Like hopefully AI can teach us there's a point where we need to stop and leverage it and go back to being people, which is not what the people we're going to compete against think at all.
Well, I'm going to end with this note, and then we'll go to your questions and answers, which is remember that only you can prevent Skynet, and that humans are still the expert on humanity. We always will remain the experts on humanity. Let's discuss this a little bit. Do we have any questions?
Can I make one quick announcement?
Of course, please.
Two things are going to happen. If anybody wants a handcrafted Hour Blue butterfly, there were hundreds given out in Europe, and there'll be hundreds given out here today. Come up to the stage right after. And the secret algorithms of Synthpy are being knitted on stage by our punk rock knitter, Mad Rain. So someone in the audience will get it at the end. Let's go to questions.
Which answers the question, what's up with the lovely knitting lady in the corner? Well, this is Mad Rain. She requires no introduction. We thought you would know who she is, and she's over here programming an analog computer quietly while we all discuss the digital ones. Here's a question I'd like to throw out from an anonymous person who says, how can immersive digital story worlds contribute to preserving and promoting the diverse cultural narratives, and what steps are taken in Hour Blue to achieve this? Rony would like to grab. Go for it, Rony.
That's a great question. Number one, I think you have to be very careful not to appropriate other cultures without working with those artists. And for example, working with WETA Workshop, one of the artists is a native Maori, who's amazing and has done probably some of the greatest art that has been the iconic definition of the world we've been building with Richard and his team for a number of years. And so I think it's like making sure the artists you work with are bringing in a diverse and creative mindset, and what parts of their culture they want to share really becomes a discussion. But an example here, this artist is amazing, Richard knows exactly what I'm talking about, has created some of the most iconic, definitive pieces of art that will really define what this world looks like. So I think we are trying to do that.
It sounds like it's important to keep a certain amount of humanity involved versus training an AI, Jessica,
What's the question?
do you think we should train the AI to handle this task, or do you think we should keep humanity in charge to make sure that we accomplish this?
I mean, I guess if it's about preserving and promoting, I mean, I think that's a lot on us, isn't it? Like the people who are involved building the worlds, like the worlds themselves don't just exist, they're people. It's like, you know, AI isn't just AI, it's people's data, it's other people engineering the, you know, the system. So I absolutely believe that we shouldn't just leave this up to AI to figure out how to do. We should grow up and be better people and do it ourselves.
I happen to agree with that. Richard, the Kyoto Test describes, this is from a Joshua Rubin, the Kyoto Test describes the serendipity of real life. Shouldn't we be inspiring people to explore the real world instead of losing themselves in some fictional world?
Yeah, Joshua, that's obviously a terrific question, but it begs the question, every book that you've ever read lying on your bed growing up, why didn't you go out and kick the soccer ball around instead? Why didn't you go for a hike? Every movie house that you entered and whiled away 3 hours of your life, why didn't you just wander through town, go into a cafe, chat to people? Of course, you're mixing it up. You're doing all of those things. It's offering the fertile human mind the option of choice. And there's another component to the question, which is that the ability to visit and see the real world is the privilege of a very limited few on the planet. And why shouldn't we offer rich exploratory experiences to everyone on the planet in the manner that cinema has done for such a long time, authors have achieved since the beginning of the time. The shaman around the campfire has evoked these mythological and spiritual worlds through human imagination. I respect and appreciate the question that you're asking, because it is a critical component of this, that I personally deplore the idea of my children being lost for hours and hours in their technology, and we as a husband and wife are constantly prodding them to get outside and sniff the roses. But they have a choice, and what we are choosing to get involved in is the ability to offer another choice to people, take it or leave it as they choose.
Can I have a little?
Of course.
Okay, so I think this is an amazing question, and I love the answer you gave, Richard. I think if I were to respond, though, as someone who reads a book, I can leave the book when I can. I see that the book is a book and that there's real world around the book, and you can rest it on a table, I can put it on the shelf. But if you're trying to convince somebody you're in an immersive world and you lose sight that you are, there's no book to put down. Maybe there's a headset, but maybe you lose sight of the headset or lose the feel of the headset. What I think is really critical here about the story world is that at its best, it should be inspiring people to leave it and live their lives better, and be able to aspire to go out in the world and connect with people they wouldn't otherwise connect to, experience something they wouldn't otherwise experience. Like in Rony's example, like if I were in that situation, I'd want to go out and actually talk to people more and ask them questions, or go into these, maybe not all the random side shops that are by, with one person in them, but I bring my husband, we both go together. But this idea that like, these are the things that technology was meant to do when it was first. Like a computer was meant to augment the human experience, right? To make it more efficient and effective for us to be able to live our lives. Instead, we have screens that block the real world from us, when the whole point of these computing systems was meant to have us have a better relationship with our planet. And I actually think climate change, a lot of what's going on right now, the socioeconomic issues that are going on, look at me talking about this, it's crazy.
Let's tackle them all.
Yeah, all the things. A lot of those problems, I think, come fundamentally from the computing systems that block out our experience with the real world. And so I think what's going to be really critical here is that the story worlds, as wonderfully immersive and beautiful and as stunning as they could be and will be, need to have something in there that reminds people that they do live in the world and the world is out there and they should go explore it more.
I think the only answer to that is, of course, right?
Yeah, no.
Of course, it would be reckless to think otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And it's such at an individualistic level, you're capable of putting down a book and exiting it. My wife can only put down a book when she collapses exhausted at the end of the last page, because the book becomes all-encompassing to her, and it is as immersive and as deeply burying as any video game, such as the need to consume the literature within it. We are individuals in how we choose and engage with our story worlds is of our own choice. But I totally agree with you. We would be reckless to think otherwise, and we're not reckless people. We're highly respectful people that are trying to offer something rich and beautiful.
And a final word to Rony, and then I have an announcement after that for you.
Yeah, just want to 10 seconds on that. That idea that the world has to be blocked out is the virtual reality mentality, right? A few years ago, we built this amazing thing called Tonandi, which means sound spirit in Icelandic, with the band Sigur Rós. And Tonandi, you saw the real world directly, and these sound spirits floated around you. They were the voices of Jónsi and the band. And it brought you into the real world with a heightened experience. And the idea behind it was prototyping the idea that we could release sound spirits into caves and the landscape of Iceland, because they believe in spirits. So you can go there, and these sound spirits would live amongst the terrain. So you'd go explore the cave and realize, like, oh, there's a sound spirit there. And maybe the people who lived there 1,000 years ago saw them, but now you'll see them again too. So you could have this real world experience, go out hiking, go to a mountain. Some of the most amazing things people told me about Tonandi, they go to Joshua Tree and do Tonandi in golden hour, right? And they said it was just the most amazing, trippy thing. I don't know what else they were doing, but you know, that idea that you could be in the real world and make a heightened presence, almost like a shamanic presence, I think is also possible. It doesn't all have to be virtual reality that blocks out everything. It could be this blend, which I think is going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's all about the blend there. Yeah, I like it.
It's all about the blend.
All about the blend.
Thank you to all of you. Rony, you and I have talked so long about how this is a time in humanity where we need to balance technological and biological evolution. And that I'm very hopeful that SynthP rises to that purpose, and humanity can continue to live up to its real purpose, which is to contribute as much love and intellect to the universe as possible. With that, Mad Rain, we are closing our proceedings, so if you can give the source code out to the audience.
All right, we're going to fling this to somebody who will raise their hands, and we'll see what happens. Oh.
That's the source code for SynthP. All you have to do
Please
is figure
do not
out.
unravel it. The source code is on the surface.
Just figure out how to do it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you everyone on the live stream. Have a good South by Southwest.
And if you want a butterfly, come up here.